morning. As she said, I'm Wendy, and I'm here to introduce our speaker today. We have the honor of having Senator Mike Morrell speak to us about is there hope for California? Interesting question that we've all been wondering about. He actually is close to joining the endangered species list because he is one of 10 Republican senators. You might recall that in the state of California there are 40 senators total. He's one of 10 conservatives there. He's born and raised in California, married here, raised his 3 kids here, opened 2 businesses here, Provident Home Loans and Provident Realty, both incorporated in 1989. So he's been here, he's here to stay hopefully, and he now represents California's 23rd State Senate District, serves on 5 Senate committees, and the 2 interesting ones that I'm curious to hear about are housing, with all the homelessness in the state, and the Committee on Labor, Public Employees, and Retirement, and what's happening with those pensions. Anyway, he regularly receives high honors for all of his work. The National Federation of Independent Business gives him high honors, California Chamber of Commerce, the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. He's also been named Legislator of the Year by the Military Officers Association of America, which is very cool. He and his wife, Joni, who's also here today, they've been married for 42 years, raised 3 children, Kristen, David, and Matthew. Kristen has a whole pile of grandchildren in Arizona. Don't get any thoughts about moving there. Their oldest son, David, actually got to work in the White House recently. He's an attorney back in D.C., and their youngest son, Matthew, also is in Arlington, Virginia, back there. So it would be interesting if he ever got a job in D.C. representing the state of California. Got my fingers crossed on that one. Anyway, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Senator Mike Morrell.
Thank you very, very much. It's good to see all of you. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to be here. Let me reword this. It's great to be out of Sacramento and in a room full of people who are normal. So, 2 things that I think all of us heard you're not supposed to talk about: religion and politics. Am I right? But you know, if you take a casual view of all of history, the only 2 ways men oppress other men and either send them into 1,000 years of bondage or set them free are through those 2 institutions. C.K. Chesterton said, those are the only 2 things we should be talking about today, ladies and gentlemen. And so I'm going to talk about both of those today. In my speech, people ask me, is there hope for California? And there is, and it's not, I'm not saying it from a politician's point of view. Churchill, during the darkest days of World War II, would always give people hope, but he always stopped short of giving them guarantees. And that's sort of where I'm at, because the guarantee comes only if we do our part. You know, Edmund Burke says, evil only triumphs when good men, but now that we have to be politically correct, good men, good women, and good whatever else is, allow evil to triumph. The ball's in our court providentially, whether or not we're going to speak out and do the job we should be. And that's part of the challenge we've had, is we've just been quiet and good people. We don't want to push other people's buttons, but there's a lot to lose here. I got involved with politics. I appreciate Stephen's good prayer. When I was younger, 25, we started having kids, or 28, I think I was 28 when we had our first. And I kept asking God for a purpose in life. And the scripture that kept coming back to me was, the duty of a father is to leave his children an inheritance, and their children an inheritance. And I used to wonder, oh, God, okay, $20 to him, $10 to her, and that's it. But I knew that went beyond just the financial, but also freedom for our country. But the stakes are even higher today. As my friend mentioned here, we have grandkids now. We've got 6 grandkids and 1 in escrow. And so the stakes are higher. The stakes are higher, and I am just pleased that I told my kids to watch exactly what Mike Morrell does and do the opposite, and you'll do fine in life. Well, Kristen is her priority. This is so weird. She puts her family first. Isn't that bizarre these days? But she still manages to teach a class on political American exceptionalism at Arizona Christian University. And also then Dave did work at the White House, and one of his jobs, which we were real happy with, was he was one of the guys that vetted a lot of these originals as judges for the federal courts. So if you like those judges, yeah. And then Matt used to work at Hillsdale College. Any Hillsdale College fans? Yeah. And then he went to work in Alexander. So they're all trying to save the country. They know that things are, and I like to tell people that they got their smarts and good looks from me, but no one ever believes that. They always give their credit. So there is hope, but again, a lot of the ball is sort of in our court, right? Yeah. You know? But here's something, because I've had a few of you today ask me, are you leaving California? You know, when you're going to go to another state like other people does. But you've heard the saying, as California goes, so goes the nation. Yes. Guys, I'm convinced, and I could be wrong, but I believe California is a battleground for the soul of America. It's like we can't leave. We have to fight. And besides, that's what good people do, is we stand our ground. But instead, people are moving, and those people are moving. The joke's going to probably be on them, because it's going to follow them if we don't stop. And I got a couple of things. There are some challenges, but I'm going to give you some, what I believe are some key leading indicators why I really think there could be something happening. Usually I save it to the end, but I just want to give you two real quick. I just got an email from a guy named David Lane. Have you guys ever heard of him? Renewal America. So there's some wealthy people back in Texas and stuff that is concerned, as California goes, so goes the nation. So they're funding him to come out here and start having seminars for pastors and youth pastors to get involved to save California. And these are people from back in Texas, if you can believe that. Second thing, and I just want to give this club a compliment. You know, Southern California tends to be more conservative. Not much more, but we have more. Most of the Republicans are in Southern California, Central Valley. And so I've spoken in the Central Valley and in Southern California, of course. And we usually don't get turnouts like this, right? And so I was speaking to a gentleman, and I told him that the last time I came up here, I had spoken to the Silicon Valley Republican Women's Club. And he said, how many women showed up? 5 or 6, you know? And I said, no, there was well over 100. And so I want you to know, I've incorporated that into my speeches in Southern California. And so you guys, by your club, have given other people hope, because they know how difficult this area is. And so you encourage other people, your fellow brothers and sisters who are conservative. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Now for some serious stuff. Have you heard of the book Rules for Radicals? Yes. Okay, by Saul Alinsky. You know, it's interesting in that book, because we have to know the battle we're fighting. You know, Saul Alinsky writes in there that he dedicates his book to who? Lucifer. People say Satan, but it's interesting that he uses the word Lucifer, because Lucifer was his angelic name before he got booted out of heaven. So it must mean he has admiration for Satan, which is kind of an odd thing. But you can write a book on that. There's odd people who do odd things like that. But, you know, he does dedicate it to Satan, or Lucifer. And he talks about that the reason why is he wanted to dedicate his book to the first radical who preferred hell over heaven. Kind of a weird thing, right? But here's the thing. Some of his heroes are people like Lenin and Marx, who are responsible for butchering over 50 million people, innocent lives. And so think about this. His book is Rules How to Disrupt America Through Lies. And the people, you can tell who they are. They accuse and they blame, accuse and blame, and they never have anything of content to say. But here's the thing why we should take Rules for Radical very serious. By Saul Alinsky. Do you know that our former president, Barack Obama, taught a class on this guy at the University of Chicago before he became president? And so you think we don't... Number 2, Hillary Clinton, our president... That's not a very good one. Hey, I just want you to know she's having so much pressure to run. Anyway, according to her. But so anyway, she did her thesis on college on this guy. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the thing. It's kind of interesting. The scriptures even tell us that our fight isn't against flesh and blood, but against the principalities of darkness. And if you remember, Reagan said the same thing in 1964. If you go back and listen to a speech when he gave in San Francisco, I believe it was, 1964, on behalf of Barry Goldwater, he gave a speech, and he hated communism because he said it was a spiritual problem, whereas years later Nixon and Kissinger thought it was an economic problem, thought Reagan was wrong. But Reagan says, catch this, because I had to listen to it 3 times, that about the Soviet Union, it's the oldest lie since we were told at the garden, which garden? Garden Eden, that ye shall become gods. I thought that was interesting because we know who said that. So Reagan, later on when he became president, 3 times in his speech, blamed communism, and he wrote in there calling them the evil empire, and 3 times the State Department struck that from his speech. They finally sent Nancy in there to say, Ronnie, you can't say that. But eventually he called them the evil empire, and I went back and read old issues of Time Magazine and Newsweek, and they just raked him across saying he was crazy, he was this, he was that. But eventually he told Secretary Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And that wall came down. 1.2 billion people were set free. So in Reagan's words, they could experience the joys of knowing God. So, and they say people of faith shouldn't be involved with politics. That's a lie, isn't it? So anyway, we are in a battle, and it is a spiritual one, especially when you read Rules for Radicals. It's pretty bad, and especially when you know who some of his fans are, who have destroyed nations. And so I think we need to be aware of that. And here's why. I get a lot of people coming up to me, a lot, and they say, how about those guys in Sacramento? Don't they have any common sense? Well, guys, here's what. We give them too much credit when we say they have common sense. Have you ever, you need to realize they're not playing on the same team we are, guys. They're on the Saul Alinsky team. Many of them seem to embrace the political ideologies of Marx and Lenin over those of Lincoln and Washington. Do you get it? Yeah. And so that's why we have a serious problem on our hands, and we can always play nice, but we gotta toughen up a little bit, because we've got a lot of we've got our country on the line, starting right here in California. And any of us, all of us, I know, love our kids and our grandkids. And we got to give, the sand for me is running out of that hourglass. And Joni and I are committed to doing everything we can for our country and for the next generation, because the stakes are high, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, these guys play for keeps. Dr. Larry Arnn, who's a fan of mine, I knew him when he was in California, and he mentored me a little bit. And that was kind of cool. Now he's president of Hillsdale College. He believes we've entered the 3rd great American crisis, which is serious stuff. And that's whether or not we're going to maintain our constitutional government or descend into a despotic government, always ruled with aggressiveness and aggressive hostility towards people of faith and, of course, business owners and that type of thing. So there's a lot of work to do. But, here in California, under 40 years of one-party rule, and by the way, they no longer call themselves progressives, which means the expansion of the bureaucratic state. They call themselves socialists. And I looked up the definition of communism, and communism is an extension of socialism only by force. And so who knows where this is going to go. But the thing is as I listen to their floor speeches, they do not think like we do as liberty-loving Americans. So we have to realize where the battle is, and then that helps us be able to pinpoint, to have a better strategy and on how to win these things. But kind of little brief things that I want to go over. I think for the first year, I think these guys have overplayed their hand. And I'll tell you why. There's the sanctuary state most people don't like. And we need to make a case about that. We know we have the highest taxes. But did you know CEO Magazine, for 13 years in a row, send out questionnaires to some of the top 500 CEOs in America, and for 13 years in a row they written back and responded to California is the worst place to do business, and we see how many people are leaving, and people are very concerned about that, ladies and gentlemen. I have people all the time who are small business owners telling me they might leave. Number two, education used to be number one when we had local control. When Jimmy Carter moved it back east, and then they've got Common Core, No Child Left Behind, our test scores get worse. So I don't know where we are today, anywhere from 44th to 49th and that sort of thing. But here's another thing. There was a bill passed, ladies and gentlemen, why we have to be engaged and exercise our civic responsibility vigorously more than we ever have in our entire lives is because they did a bill, I don't know if the governor signed it, but on charter schools, they're putting in the hands of the local school districts whether or not the local school districts make the decision whether they need another charter. And you know what they're going to do. And interesting, those charter schools and homeschool. I love homeschools because some of these moms have never been to college, but yet those homeschool kids' test scores and charter schools outperform public school. Go figure, right? And we spend more than almost any state in America. AB, I want to talk a little bit about homelessness. A couple of things about homes. I'm not going to go over it real quick, but the problem with first of all, like first-time home buyers, it's not an issue of so much land, it's government. Government messes everything up. You know, the average builder spends $140,000 per lot just for permits and got to get through OSHA and everything like that before they even build a home. Very difficult because they have to pass that on. And then if they use prevailing wage, what the unions are trying to, the unions and the environmentalists are working together. Environmentalists, Lewis Holmes, Randall Lewis told me this just a few months ago. They had a project in Highland, California, 6,000 homes, which was going to be built for first-time home buyers. But OSHA, 6 years, they wouldn't give them a go on their project. And then finally, one of the unions came by and said, hey, we can make OSHA go away if you hire our union people. But the problem is, yeah, that's corrupt, isn't it? But the problem is that adds about $84,000 onto the cost of the home, so there goes your cost. So anyway, most of our problems we have, I want to say, is government. And remember, the thing that we have to relearn and reteach and restore are those political principles contained in our founding documents, meaning the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, because it limits government's power. It restores control to the local municipalities, ladies and gentlemen. And we just can't invoke the Constitution. We have to really go back and start learning some of these things. And one place I recommend for a half hour a day is listen to the Hillsdale Dialogues on government. I just love it. It certainly helps me, and I steal a lot of my quotes from there. So I don't know. There's nothing original that I'm going to say that I haven't taken from someone else. But anyway, another thing too. Another reason for homelessness, it has exploded, as you guys know, in San Francisco, right? The beautiful city by the bay. And so AB 109 a few years ago released low-level offenders from state prison. But I've spoken to law enforcement. They said the average man that goes to prison up in state prison has been arrested between 6 and 8 times at the local level. And so now these guys are out on the streets, 50, 60, 70,000 of them, as they say, low-level offenders, drug addicts who don't want to go into rehab. Thus, that's one. See, it's bad policies. Everything that we see, ladies and gentlemen, is bad policies, and it goes back to someone back there who quoted Edmund Burke earlier. Evil only triumphs when good people don't get involved. And so that's one of the reasons for homelessness, why it's exploding, sanctuary states. I want to say another bill that the Democrats, you're going to start hearing more on this, why I think they overplayed their hand. They alienated so many people. The anti-vaxxer moms, now a lot of people are anti-vax, but I spoke to a lot of those moms. Many of them are Democrats from the Bay Area. And the Democrats totally disrespected them. But the women I spoke to, it isn't that there's so much against anti-vaccinations. What they are is they don't want the legislature determining how many shots their kids can get. One lady pointed out to me, and I tried to confirm it as best as I could, but in the 50s there was 4 vaccinations required. Now there's like 13, but they have between 5 and 7 boosters in there, so it's like 72 are required today. And back in our day, only 4 was required. So what the only thing that the majority of those moms want is they wanted to go back to determine between them and their doctor. Isn't that what the free market's all about? And so we've got a chance to put those guys in our court if we play our cards right, ladies and gentlemen. Because again, the Dems, our friends, overplayed their hand on that one. Another one, AB 5, independent contractors. Lorena Gonzalez and the unions want to make anybody that's an independent contractor being commissioned to be employed now on a W-2 and get their Social Security paid. And so I was on the Labor Committee. I'm the only Republican on the Senate Labor Committee. So it's usually a 4-1 vote. And I'm used to losing, man. I was born to lose, I guess. So anyway, at least here in California. So I asked Lorena Gonzalez, I said, do you believe in the phrase opportunity for all and favoritism towards none? And she said, absolutely I do. I said, well, you're carving out, I'm a realtor, which is good. We have a big union. So realtors are independent contractors, but they don't have to be W-2 because their lobbyist is powerful. And so I said, how come you're allowing the powerful lobbies to be exempted for this, but then other ones you aren't? That is picking and choosing winners. Carve out, even the word carve outs should be offensive to us. She goes, well, that's not how I look at it. But anyway, here I just want you to know why, again, I think this is really bad, and you're going to see people that I think we can get in our side of the aisle. Because I'll just give you two examples of many that didn't get carve-outs. One was the independent truckers, the 18-wheelers. They spent $150,000 to $200,000 on their trucks. They're not rich people. Those guys typically, independent truckers, 78% of the goods and services, cars, food, groceries, clothes, furniture, are trucked in on 18-wheelers, 78%. So if those guys go away, then the companies that do pay W-2, we're going to have a supply and demand, and our costs are going to go up probably $2,400 per family. But the independent contractors, here's their dilemma, like so many other ones. They don't just haul for one company. They'll haul for 10 to 20 different companies. So they have to go back to those companies and say, will you make me a W-2 employee and pay my W-2? It's not going to happen. The other ones were the physical therapists, which I never knew this. Speaking with one lady, she works for 11 doctors. And so she's going to have to go back to 11 doctors and say, you need to make me an employee. And you see what I'm saying? And so what happens, guys, this is a nightmare because a lot of people are going to be surprised. Joni and I were on vacation a few weeks ago, and I was talking to a gentleman that ran a financial planning service in Orange County, and all of his guys are W-2s except for his administrative staff. And I was telling him about that, and I said, you guys didn't get a carve-out. He goes, he didn't know what to say. He didn't even know. Wait till this hits him on January 1st. So again, but the thing that was so great about it, my friends across the aisle are so arrogant, cocky, because they've got all the power. I'll quote a few scriptures in here because I know you guys are used to that, but pride goeth before the fall. Remember that, right? And I'm hoping that scripture holds true here in California, that happens pretty soon. But another thing too, that worries me. I was in business. I had two companies. I had a real estate company and I had a lending company. So I tried really hard to work hard to try to make money. Joni managed it though, so I never saw much of that money. I don't know if we're rich or broke. So she says just keep working. But one of the things, because we want to be able to have our families thrive financially. But here's something that's more important: is immorality is a cancer on any nation. That's not Mike Morrell's opinion. That you can casual view of history. George Washington, the centerpiece of his farewell address, he wanted to remind Americans that of all the habits and dispositions which lead to political prosperity, morality and religion are indispensable supports. So then what I did too, I don't know what causes me to do these things, but I was reading, I think it was the book of Deuteronomy one day. I just happened to notice that Moses says, hey, the children of Israel, when you go to this promised land, you're going to be given prosperity, homes, vineyards, pomegranate trees, fresh streams of water, and you're going to have the peace and safety to enjoy those things. He says it over 50 times in those 34 chapters. But then right after that, he says something else. He says, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful, be careful to follow those moral laws, decrees, and commands. Because if not, you're going to die, you see. And so whether it's Washington to Moses, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Virgil, Cicero, Thomas Aquinas, John Locke, or Samuel Rutherford, they'll all agree that of all the habits and dispositions which lead to a nation's prosperity overall, and peace and safety, is morality and religion. And so that's the thing, when I think about that and I look at a casual view of history, I see what's happening in our country. Your friend Scotty Wiener from right down the street here, he had a bill that you can molest a boy to as young as 14. There's a few other things to that point of that bill, but I'll just give you the highlight. And then that guy, if he gets caught, will not be on the sexual registry. Guys, who would vote for that? It honestly bothers me. So I asked one of my fellow senators, how do you even think that through? And the answer to me was, in such and such country, it's 12 years old. And so that, and then, the sex curriculum, have you guys really? Okay, because, see, I want you to know, I am not a prude, okay? Well, I haven't been around that much, but I'm not a prude either, okay? But the thing is, this has gone from the informative to the explicit. My gosh, in case if you don't know, because I'm not going to share those things, but there's a part on there in abstinence, right? And they tell the young ladies, if you can't abstain, here's some toys that you can buy, and if you can't find the toys, look in your refrigerator. And so, so I looked at that book. And I just happened to close that book, and I noticed on the front of the page it says for ages 10 years and up. Oh. And so again, we're slouching towards that place we shouldn't be slouching towards. And so, but here's another thing about the Democrats overplaying their hand. I went out because I was in Sacramento, so Rockland's about a half-hour drive. I went over there. I heard there were some moms, not a formal group, just some moms, 35, 37-year-olds, getting together to have a meeting. And I walked in there, the auditorium was full, so I asked somebody, how many women? So far, like 535 had signed in that evening. Just moms wanting to take back this thing. And then there was a meeting down in Marietta, same thing. And then the church our pastor had 4,000 moms show up recently. And so all over the state, there's concerned parents that know this stuff's bad, ladies and gentlemen. And so we have to capitalize on that, and we have to let people know. And that's why we cannot be silent, because I've talked to people about these different bills, and they go, oh, yeah. But when I explain really what happens, they can't believe the stuff that's really in there. And that's even speaking to young people. And so we have to. But by the way, I've got a bill, SB 673, and I hope you guys first of the year really help me push it, because what my bill is on the sex curriculum. Did you know the school, this is so disingenuous. They have an opt-out, right? Doesn't that sound good? Hey, well, your kid can opt out. Well, what happens, they'll show the curriculum in many cases to your kids and grandkids, and then, the parents find out. Then, after the damage is done, they can opt out. So what I did is I have an opt-in, but before the parents can opt in, they have to review all the material. So that means the school district has to have all the material, not their 2 or 3 pages that sounds nice, but the whole enchilada available online. Thank you. I usually, at the Capitol, I'm hearing them throw the bum out, so that was nice. So thank you for that one. But anyway, it's got to be available online so the parents can read it. And then if they say, yeah, I want my kid, then they sign an opt-in. Do you see the difference? Yeah. And so my friends don't want to hear this bill. And by the way, the school districts say it'll cost too much money to put that online. I tell you what, for $300, I can find a college kid to put all that stuff online. So we'll be hearing more about that a little bit later. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know the other side's in it to win. And one of the things is I talked to some of you on the boards last night. I was trying to sense what message do I really want to deliver here today. And here's my number one thing that I want to get a point. We have to make the case. We can no longer be silent. Silence is deadly, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to tell you a few things that I've learned. Last year, we went to Arizona for 3 weeks. We have a house over there. So I walked around the park trying to think, what do I need to do next? And I was listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, and I listened to Churchill, how he lived his life, Lincoln, how he lived his life. And Marcus Aurelius was an interesting guy. He had these things called the meditations. And basically, to be a great leader, you have to be willing to lose everything and risk everything. That's what it takes to change countries, ladies and gentlemen. And now I'm reading a book on Alexander the Great, and he felt the same way, man. You're either all in or you're all out, right? And then that Sunday before Christmas last year, Joni and I went to church, and I've been telling her, this is kind of what I'm wondering, what we're supposed to be doing in life. And the pastor gives a sermon about Christ came to give it all. He was prepared to lose everything. And so I think the thing is we have to be prepared in the spirit of the founding. Think about that last paragraph. It's wonderful, and we don't want to blow over that. But it closes the declaration with a firm reliance upon divine providence. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Sacred honor means you give the deepest part of your soul, you give everything. And those guys did. There was a guy named John Hunt who, when he finally got back from Philadelphia, his farm was destroyed, it was burned, his wife was in prison, later dying from injuries from prison, and then his 13 kids were scattered and he never saw them again. He died broke, lonely, and that was just one of others had their boys put in jail. And I tell you, they gave everything, and we could be at a point where we need to do that. But the only thing I'm asking now today is to just not be silent, to make the case, right? And we're told, by the way, in the scriptures to refute all these bad ideologies and every foolish argument that there is. Our job is to counter those things. Amen. And let me give you a couple of examples, too. Ronald Reagan, like I said earlier, he went to Hollywood Presbyterian, and his pastor mentored him on the tenets of Marxism. And then for GE, starting in 1958, he went around the country giving anti-communist speeches for the General Electric. They wouldn't let anybody do that now, right? But anyway, he did, and eventually, we know the story where he turns out he ends communism. But remember, it took him 30 years to make the case, ladies and gentlemen, but he never stopped. Lincoln, it took 15 years for him to make the case against slavery. And to be honest with you, it probably took him even longer than that, because he was very upset. He gave this one speech where he points to the lady working in the field, the slave, and then he says, she works, sweats and toils, and then that guy over there, a slaveholder, consumes her bread. It's interesting how providence can work things. Do you know when Lincoln was a young boy, a teenager, his father used to send him out to neighborhood farms. He'd work all summer. Those people would pay his father, and Lincoln wouldn't get any money. Do you see why Lincoln thought that was so unfair? You see? And so Lincoln made the case all of his life. You see, he did. And in Churchill, he had his 7 wilderness years where he was kicked out of Parliament, basically. So what he decided to do, and this is how I feel, why talk to the politicians? I've never seen a floor speech since I've been in the Senate that we've ever persuaded anybody to change their vote on anything, right? And so the thing is, but the people, Reagan knew that, Churchill knew it, Lincoln knew it, but Churchill went up and down during his wilderness years, 7 years, just making a case against Hitler. Hitler was a bad guy because he had read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. But the rest of the country wanted peace, and then Chamberlain at the time, the prime minister, was one of those compromisers, right? He was a never-Trumper back then. And so again, there are no heroes in heaven. They don't write books about compromisers, do they? Only those people who put their neck on the line. And so we want to remember that. But anyway, he was cast out, and then finally, when Chamberlain, along with France, signs a peace treaty with Hitler regarding Czechoslovakia, because the Brits wanted peace. 5 months later, I believe it was, or 6 months, Hitler invades Czechoslovakia, and then guess who the people were recruiting? Because Hitler's heading towards heading towards France, right? And so Churchill's in, and so again, he made some things on why I believe there's some hope. Consider this, though. I want to read this from Winston Churchill. I like the guy. Remember the London Blitz? 57 consecutive nights London was being bombed by the Nazis. Those are some pretty bad odds. FDR didn't want to sell him any destroyers because he was afraid they would fall into the hands of the Nazis. So he lent them out with our guys on board in case things got tough, and we just sail the boats right out of there. But anyway, Churchill says this, and folks, I believe this: when great causes are on the move in the world, stirring all men's souls, drawing them from their firesides, casting aside comfort, wealth, and the pursuit of happiness in response to impulses at once awe-striking and irresistible, we learn that we are spirits, not animals, and it's something that's going on in time and space, and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. I think what he means is we don't know what Providence is doing. In Churchill's case, they were being bombed 57 consecutive nights, so it didn't look good. But you know what? Ours is duty, and it's to be fighting, and it's to be doing the right things. And twice before, in 1936, in our Senate, the United States Senate, there was 76 Democrats and only 16 Republicans. Did you guys know that? And FDR was president. And look how we've come back, folks. And so those are worse odds than what California has today. So that's why we good people, we just can never give up. And so I am convinced things are on the move. And again, you know, our platform, that's an argument. We have to restore the Constitution because it limits government's power. Everyone I meet, whether Democrat or liberal, for the most part, wants to limit government's power. People don't trust government. You know, the millennials, their number one guy is Bernie Sanders, right? But did you know polling says 41% of those guys are entrepreneurial. They want to own their own business. Now think about that. How can you like Bernie Sanders? Here's why. Because as Republicans, we haven't made the argument to them, ladies and gentlemen. Big government's is going to be their problem, you know, and less government is going to let them thrive. And so I am convinced they're ours, and I'll give you some reasons why. On this, I have some things I've noticed, and that is, and Joni likes this, and I hire interns. The average senator probably hires 3 to 5 interns per year. I didn't know that when I got to the Senate, so I probably have 30 to 40 go through our training every year. And we train them, we work them hard, we teach them even how to answer a phone and take a message properly, right? But also we introduce them to the Hillsdale Dialogues. We introduce them to Plutarch, Aristotle, Ethics by Aristotle. We go over some selective writings of the Federalist Papers. And I got to tell you, we take them tall, short, liberal, conservative, we don't care. And I got to tell you, they have been a breath of fresh air to me because I perceived them wrong in the beginning. Many of them disagree with me, but in the end, they're truth seekers. They're better than what my generation was when it came to seeking truth. They love the laws of nature and of nature's God in the first paragraph of the Declaration. If you don't know what that is, that's the whole basis of law in America, because the next sentence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Where does that truth come from? It comes from the laws of nature, meaning you can discover truth through history or human nature, and eventually that comes from the God of nature, and they love that. I got to tell you what's happened is a couple of times a year we invite these guys over for dinner. We meet at in the building we're at, there's like Coliseum seating, and and we bill it for an hour and a half, 6:30 to 8. You know, come and have tacos, pizza, hour and a half. The last 2 that we did, I want you to know, those meetings lasted past midnight with those young people asking questions. So, yeah. And one of the things too that I got to tell you I am proud of, but we're producing results with a lot of them. I got one guy that went to the White House. His name's Elliot. He called me, thanked me for giving him his start, and he's in the communications department. And I said, if you succeed, I'm going to take credit for it. But if you blow it, I said, I'm going to disavow that I ever knew you, Elliot. So we've got other ones that have gone in management positions at Caltrans, and they disdain big government. And I shouldn't say that too loud. Maybe it wasn't Caltrans if you're filming me. Maybe it was Caltrain. I've got one right now that's a city councilman. He's only 25 years old and he wants to run for the state assembly. I don't know how that's going to go. But we've got him at the Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Finance. If that's for me, to tell him I'll be done about 10 more minutes. But and we've got them working in Senate offices, Assembly offices, and even some congressional offices, guys. And so we're producing results. We're building a bench for the future. And again, they're not perfect. That's for sure. But I never realized how many of them are truth seekers. But they don't want. I mean, when they ask you a question, you may be there an hour. I want you to know this. So you have to be prepared to give them an answer, because they're not just going to take a yes or a no lightly. But that has just been something really, really positive that I've seen. Another thing, too, Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America, and I'll be winding this up hopefully in the next few minutes, and I think we're okay, aren't we, on time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Alexis de Tocqueville, he wrote that book, Democracy in America. It's about 700 pages. And he gives all hundreds of criteria on what made America great. And he said that we're surrounded by these two vast oceans, which keeps away our natural enemies. We have great natural resources and stuff. But you know where he said that the greatness laid? He said, when I walked into the churches and saw that the pulpits were aflame with righteousness, he said, these guys taught what was immoral from that which is moral. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a void here today, as you probably know. Many of these pastors have gone missing in action. I call them user-friendly, seeker-sensitive. You know, the church is what's happening. Yeah, my daughter sends me this thing, the Babylon Bee. And the one the other day, this pastor can't figure out, it's a joke, satire. He can't figure out why they're losing members. He says, I'm giving them everything the world has, right? And so anyway, but the thing is Alexis de Tocqueville says, these are the gatekeepers to men's souls. They're the ones that made politics great. 27 of the founders either were in the ministry or studied for the ministry. And that's why Washington said, this became the greatest country because it's the first time the best of Athens intersected Jerusalem, meaning faith and reason. And so anyway, so this is bad. I told you guys last year I happen to have a guy that's crazy. He's on steroids when it comes to getting involved with politics. Pastor Jack Hibbs, I love him. You know, great guy. Yeah, you can clap for him. He needs to. But anyway, here's what's happened over the last few years. By the way, today I'm speaking at a Bible college when I'm done with here. They're letting me through the door, Golden State Baptist Bible College, you know? And so since I've been complaining about pastors, I've had the opportunity to speak at different conferences to probably over 600 pastors. And last year, over 300 came to the Capitol. You know why they came to the Capitol? They want to be trained how to pay back to their state. They're getting nervous and worried. And so any of you who have pastors, I would lovingly put pressure on them, but also let them know, do you know there's 600 to 700? A matter of fact, probably more than that. David Lane told me at the last meeting he had in Orange County, 400 pastors showed up for their training on how to take back California. So let's just hope they've got the willpower to go through with that, guys. But another thing, too, last year I passed out something for you to sign. I should have brought back another one this year, but I was lax in doing that. But you signed up for my action alert. How many you get that? So these pastors came up the year before last, and they said, how many bad bills on immorality are there? I said, at least 40 to 50. And they asked me, how many would you like stop? I said, let's stop all of them. But then they asked me, how many did you guys stop the previous year? And I said, none. So they said, well, why don't we start with 3 bills? Here's what I'd like you to know. And a lot of this is because of you folks. To get on our action alert, just call our office, because we show you how to lobby strategic and intentionally, so you're not wasting your time, your vote. But for the first time in those 4 years, with your help and the help of those pastors being involved, we stopped 7 bad bills last year, ladies and gentlemen. So let me blow through a couple of things. You know, California has such a rich history. Think about this. We can't forget this. Only state with 21 missions, right? Campus Crusade was founded here. World Vision was founded here. The Azusa Street revivals were born here. And I guess now that throughout the world there's like 69 million Pentecostals, and it all started in LA. Another thing, too, up in Forest Home, do you guys know where that is? Up by Big Bear. I used to take my daughter when she was younger to the father-daughter retreat, and there's a lake there. So we hiked back to the other side of the lake, and there's a big wooden cross. And at the base of that cross, I saw a statue there dedicated to a man when he was very young who came to Forest Home in Southern California, and it was there that he believed God was calling him to preach the gospel, and the name on that plaque said Billy Graham. So here's my point. Here's my point. Many have forgotten this rich heritage, but I've recently, as of recent, have become convinced that the Almighty hasn't forgotten it, and he wants his state back, but it's up to us to take back what is rightfully his. Lastly, let me read a Churchill quote, and we'll end with that. That'll be, I guess, our call for the next few months here. And then when I'm done, I'll be happy to take some easy questions. I get intimidated with tough questions, okay? Okay, Churchill says, and this should be for us, and you've heard this, never give in, never give in, never, 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 and nothing great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense, and never yield to force, and never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy. And all God's people said? Amen. Okay, thank you guys.
The senator, isn't he wonderful? I'm going to hand the microphone to Jane.
Jane, raise your hand, she'll bring you back the mic. It looks like you wrote down a question. That makes me nervous. That means you put thought into it.
I actually have two. One is it really possible to impeach Newsom? And I've already signed polls. And the second question is, how did the state of California return the rule that you have to pay a penalty if you do not have life insurance? Because 82% of the people that money is coming from make less than $50,000. It's a tax on the poor. Health insurance. Health insurance,
Yeah, well, your second statement is as you say, and then the first statement, yes, we can recall Gavin Newsom. If we get enough signatures, you have to get about 300 more thousand signatures than what you think you need, so that's cumbersome. And then you have to find somebody to run against him, and then you got to spend millions of dollars to run against him. So you want to make sure you do. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, you got to ask my wife about that. But a couple other things. Here's what I want to say about that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not a term limit guy because the founders put that. We already have term limits. Congress is every 2 years, but yet we keep electing the same people. I mean, and so we have to work hard at making the case and not being silent. Making the case and not being silent. Because if we get rid of Governor Newsom, Comrade Newsom, who are we going to replace him with? Evan Lowe? I mean, do you know what I'm saying? And so the thing is, what?
Travis Allen. No.
Well, Travis Allen, yeah, but sure, I'm all fine with that. But Senator Mike Morrell, thank you. So,
Okay, quiet.
but anyway, the point is, we want to be strategic about those things. So I'm all in favor of this petition. But hopefully we've thought it out. In other words, who we're going to get to run if that does happen. And then you got to raise about $25 million to be able to help that person get elected and help that advertise for people to vote. And their side's going to have a lot of money. So we just want to think those things through. Or it's just better that we start thinking long-term strategies, written goals, measurable results. Long-term strategies, we make better short-term decisions. And remember, the reason Churchill, Lincoln, and Reagan took years to make the case is persuade the American people. I mean, Reagan persuaded, they call them Reagan Democrats. He had to persuade them. Do you understand? He had to make the case. He had to make the argument. He couldn't stay silent. So that's what we have to do. And that's going to take a little bit longer, but in the end run, we'll upgrade those people who represent us. That's really the way we need to get things done. But that requires us to do it. No quick fixes in life, guys. Next question. That lady back there was number 2. And the insurance is already the insurance. Part of Obamacare, from my understanding, yeah. Well, I think Gavin Newsom is bringing it back. It's still out to be decided. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Joyce, and my question is, how did the state of California get the two-tier system, and how do we get rid of it?
What is it? I'm not sure the two-tier system.
The top 2.
Oh,
The jungle primary.
the voting,
Prop 14.
I'm not exactly sure, but one of my understanding, there was a gentleman by the name of Charles Munger who helped fund a lot of that.
Right.
So,
That is correct.
is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So that's what we have. Yeah, I certainly don't like that. Well, I tell you what, but you know, there's a, hey, let me say something to you, if you would. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal about a year ago. It may have not been the Wall Street Journal. It could have been the comics, but I don't remember. But you know, it said that people of faith, on average in California, only 41% vote. And it said, do you realize if they got engaged and raised that by 11 or 12%, we'd win elections? Another thing that I found out on my own, small business owners, usually between 50 and 55% of those vote. And here's what's so interesting. They have the biggest target on their back, small business owners, but they're busy. And you know, they can persuade the people they work with. I was with some car dealerships one day, and car dealership owners, I should say. And they said, well, how do we get in trouble talking to our people and making them vote? I go, no, you don't do that. You guys are salesmen. So you're the president, you get the vice president. You've got a meeting, I told these car dealerships, and you just look at this guy and say, we've got to get so-and-so elected, or these people are going to lose their jobs. I want to make sure you help them keep their jobs. You see, so anyway, we can do the same thing. You know, we've got to persuade people. It's our job. Remember, we're a government of, by, and for the people. We're first nation in history to be governed by consent. We give our consent on who we want to rule over us. And we don't like the people that are ruling over us here, guys. And I think this is an opportune time, but we got to make the case, especially in your area. Man, I can't not believe people with common sense are going to continue to want to put up with trash they're putting up with in a place like San Francisco. The gentleman in the back, right there with his hand, the big guy.
How can we control George Soros? To me, he's one of the most evil men in this world, let alone in this country.
I don't have any, first of all, as you guys have probably already found out, I don't have the answers to everything in life. You know, I have strong opinions about things. I don't know how to answer that, but his prayer was, your prayer said that we should pray. That's the only thing I can think of, man. But we have to do it fervently. Because we're playing for all the cards and all the chips, and again, I worry about the inheritance we're leaving for my kids, and I'm more worried about our grandkids because they actually turn out cuter than my kids. Okay. No, it was not a question. It was a statement that, that he believes that to win a state, you have to come out and say the people are communists. I think today what I said is they've embraced the political ideologies of Marx and Lenin. Yes. But the thing is I think also you have to pick your spots, because what I'm finding out is you've got this many on the right who are really strong and more on the left that are strong. But you know, people up for grabs, ladies and gentlemen. Not everybody follows politics. It's interesting. Again, that's why Reagan had Democrats. That's why Churchill was able to flip people. Lincoln lost to Stephen Douglas the first time he ran against him in the U.S. Senate, because he said some things that the American people didn't like. He came back a little bit smoother, and he made the case, and he persuaded them, and that's what we have to do. So I think so far as just having a one-size-fits-all, you know, we can have our talking points, but I think we have to, more we learn, we have to pick our spots and use wisdom on how we communicate the message to people. Okay, I'm running out of people for questions, so maybe one more. Yeah, I think I would just stick at the local level. There's a scripture that says 7 things God hates, and one of them is a brother that causes dissension. So you don't want to cause dissension, but I know the last church I went to, I didn't cause dissension, but I was always asking questions, putting pressure on them, and I tried to break their will. But that's our job, ladies and gentlemen. So again, I'm just so honored that you guys let me through the door. So thank you for allowing Joni and me to be here. And after the meeting, I'd like to stay around and answer any other questions they may have. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.